Hello, I'm Kira Witherwex. Our guest today is one familiar to many viewers of Mountain Lake Journal, as he's been in our studio before to talk about his passion for history and sharing the stories of veterans and other historical witnesses. He began interviewing veterans at just 15 years old and officially launched his YouTube channel, Filmperia, at the age of 17. What started as a passion project has grown into an incredible historical archive. Luke Basso has conducted over 100 interviews with veterans from the United States, Iraq, and Afghanistan, along with Holocaust survivors and victims of communist regimes, all with the mission of preserving firsthand history from all perspectives before it's lost. Earlier this year, he traveled to Ukraine, which has been enduring a full-scale invasion and active warfare for more than 4 years. He spoke with Ukrainian soldiers, civilians, and others, documenting the realities of modern conflict. Luke spent his adolescence in Chazy, New York, and is currently a student at Cape Fear Community College in Wilmington, North Carolina. Thank you for joining us, Luke.
Thank you for having me.
You often say your goal is to preserve history. What does that responsibility mean to you personally, especially as so many World War II and Vietnam War veterans are passing away?
When I first started my YouTube channel, it was more of a passion project. And as time went on, I realized most of these veterans are dying off, especially with our World War II, Korean, and now Vietnam veterans. Over time, I realized I got to make this a priority, make sure that their stories last forever, and have them documented for the world to see.
Can you give us a brief background of how you got to be a 21-year-old entering a war zone?
I didn't know what I really wanted to do after high school. I already had my YouTube channel established, and I thought to myself, well, what's next? And in the back of my head, I've always wanted to take it a step further. I've always had an interest in modern conflicts, and back of my head, I wanted to document modern conflicts happening. In July of 2025, I went to Afghanistan into the Taliban, and that was a stepping stone to going to Ukraine. But going to Ukraine has always been in the back of my head. I remember when I was 17 years old when the Russian invasion happened in 2022, and I wanted to document that when I was still in high school. And earlier this year, in March, I had the opportunity to go there and finally document history happening in the moment.
Wow. So Ukraine has been in conflict for some time now, and it's been over 4 years since the full-scale invasion in 2022, like you mentioned. What motivated you to take the risk to going into the Ukraine?
Ukraine has always been in the back of my head since the war began, but going to Afghanistan, that was a stepping stone into going into Ukraine. Even though they're both way two different environments and way two different conflicts happening, I knew if I survived Afghanistan, then I'd be able to definitely survive Ukraine.
Okay, you are brave. Tell us about your experience getting to Ukraine, and then also once you arrived.
Getting into Ukraine, you can't fly directly into Ukraine, so I had to take a bus from Poland into Ukraine. I think the first one was about 13 hours, wow. And on the way back it was 17 hours, but just a long bus ride that was pretty exhausting, to the next day being in Ukraine trying to accomplish my mission. But it wasn't as difficult as Afghanistan, because Ukraine is a westernized country. They're just out of war. Afghanistan is a country that's in turmoil every day.
And what did you find Ukraine to be like once you arrived?
A lot of the buildings are surprisingly still intact. And the destruction, what I did saw, a lot of it was spread out. The missiles and drones, it's like artillery. It hits randomly throughout the area where I was staying in Kyiv. We only had one attack when I was there. That was the last night I was there with a giant missile attack. But the pre-existing destruction I did see, a lot of that was just spread out. It would be like a house over a few miles away, to another damaged building a few miles another way, and then a few miles a different way, another damaged or destroyed building. So there was a lot of it was spread out, and there's a lot of buildings being repaired. The first 2 days I was there, they were already on it from previous attacks. So a lot of it was intact, but the civilians who I interact with and just saw, I didn't see too many necessarily young people. Most of them are fighting. I saw a lot of females. And the men I did see, they were either older or really young, like
Sure.
before military age, like teenagers.
During your time in Ukraine, you were able to conduct interviews, which must have been fascinating. Tell us some of the people that you were able to interview.
I was able to do 4 in-person interviews when I was in Ukraine, and then 2 virtually after I got back. And the 4 people I interviewed there, one was a recon drone pilot, a former prisoner of war, a soldier who got his legs blown off at the Battle of Bakhmut, and a retired army doctor. The former prisoner of war I interviewed, he went in detail of what his time of being a prisoner in Russia was like, and he goes into details of what the Russian brutality is really like. The other guy I interviewed who got his legs blown off, I believe it was from a landmine, and he goes into detail of how that changed his life forever.
Sure.
In fact, he still wants to keep fighting, but because he's not able to because of his legs. But he still wants to do his part, and of course the military won't let him back in, and he's upset about that. He still wants to continue the fight on in his own way.
Wow. So it sounds like he's passionate about the cause. After speaking with veterans from World War II, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and now Ukrainian soldiers fighting today, what similarities and differences have stood out to you the most?
For the similarities, it sounds like a lot like World War II, because the Ukrainians I meet, they're going against tanks and a modern military and modern weapons. The differences is when I speak to veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan, they're fighting mostly a war on insurgency. The ISIS and Taliban didn't really have a modern military or an organized fighting force. It was just more of a war on insurgency.
Sure.
While the war in Ukraine, that's armies versus armies fighting each other with front lines.
Right. And what about the motivation maybe of the everyday soldier in Ukraine compared to, say, maybe like Vietnam? How in it are they? What is their passion level for the cause?
Well, the soldiers I met, those are some of the bravest people I met in my entire life. They were fighting to defend their country when the Russians years ago were at the gates of Kyiv. Now, when I compare it to other veterans from the American veterans I interviewed for the past few years, they were fighting wars overseas. The enemy wasn't at our border. With the Ukrainians, the enemy is on their border, and they're fighting to defend the country itself. I mean, yes, we were fighting to defend our country for these other wars, but we were an ocean away from the enemies we were fighting.
What surprised you most about the everyday citizens in Ukraine?
A lot of them are really desensitized to the war, that they won't even go to bomb shelters when an air raid happens. There's some Ukrainians who they just want the war to end at this point. It's been going on so long, they want someone new in charge, and that doesn't mean they want to live under Russian occupation. They just want a new leader besides Zelensky, because if the front lines have been the same for about 4 years. Not much territorial gains happening on either side, and they just want some change to happen because they're sick of years of war, that they just want to go back to their normal life.
After everything you've witnessed, from conversations with elderly veterans to visits in active war zones, what do you hope viewers take away most from your work?
Well, understanding the point of view of the average soldier fighting in said conflict, whether it be World War II or Korea, Vietnam, to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan or the war in Ukraine, understanding it from these people's point of view rather than watching a documentary or watching a YouTube video about it, which usually just covers the overall broad scale of the conflict, while these people are like just an average person defending their country or fighting in a battle, and they don't know the outcome of it. They're just fighting to survive.
Yeah. Whether it's recording the memories of our nation's veterans or documenting the realities of conflicts happening today, the interviews of Luke Basso create a lasting record that future generations can learn from. You may see Luke's work on his YouTube channel, Filmperia. It's an extensive archive of his veteran and historic witness interviews.